something I haven't told too many people. I haven't told this to Breedlove. I haven't told it to anybody. Do you know who the Trilateral Commission hired to be their personal banker? Uncle Jack hit the mother lode when he was a resident, and in there I found out this story of MK Ultra, JFK's assassination, and this story of Monsanto and melanin and chromosome 2 were all in these boxes. They were worried that I was going to release some of the information that I'm telling you right now.
We're not in a good shape at the moment, politically, economically, socially. The UK is either going to go fascist or it's going to go socialist. I've grown to really hate state. You need enough people pissed off and of the belief that it cannot be fixed from inside the system.
Shit hitting the fan is coming soon.
Joining me today are the podcast powerhouse Peter McCormack and the decentralized neurosurgeon Dr. Jack Kruse. In this episode, we discuss a centuries-old Fabian plot to reclaim absolute control, expose the UK's dire situation, and uncover Epstein's hidden obsession with the human genome. Plus, in a surprise twist, Peter reveals some of his ongoing struggles, and Dr. Kruse has just the prescription.
It's incredible that it's coming out in this podcast because I never thought we would ever go here.
All right. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining today. I was really happy to have this conversation to facilitate you guys coming together because we're all part of the same team. We're all part of Team Bitcoin. Now, Dr. Kruse, don't let me put words in your mouth, but I suspect there are some areas where you may disagree with Peter, and you might think they might be missing some information, but I think that you also view him as a very critical messaging node for the Bitcoin network, and that was good reason to kind of have these conversations, maybe share some information back and forth and hash it out. And so even just to kind of kick off the conversation, Peter, with you, I want to start by even just getting your broad view sense of the state of England. What is the state of UK politics at the moment? And even beforehand, because I know this is something that both you're aware of and Dr. Kruse talks about, could you tell us a little bit about what a Fabian is, the Fabian Society, and how you might view that actually linking into what's going on in the UK right now?
Yeah, well, thank you for arranging this, and nice to meet you, Jack. I don't know you, but I've been aware you've been talking about me quite a bit, so I thought it would be. I always think it's good to meet and talk with people perhaps you may have disagreements with most to see if you can learn from each other and perhaps try and work through some things. So Nathan had mentioned you'd been critical of me, so I was like, okay, well, let's meet and let's see if we can get to know each other. In terms of the UK, we're not in a good shape at the moment, politically, economically, socially. Like a lot of successful Western liberal democracies, we've been running a number of experiments, which I think the anti-federalists would have said were always going to happen, always going to fail, which is that we've centralized power, we've centralized money, we've centralized everything around a state which puts power ahead of the electorate. And as such, we have a collapsing economy here. We have been running a massive mass immigration, a diversity, a multiculturalism experiment, which some people were celebrating, but it's clearly failed. And so I would say probably there's probably a similarity with some of the problems we're having here that maybe they're happening in Canada, they're happening in America and across to Europe. And so we're really at a crossroads now. And some people are saying the crossroads is someone like the UK is either going to go fascist or is going to go socialist. It's like they're the choices people are trying to give us, and I think it's a bit more nuanced than that. But we're at a stage where I think we as a nation are having to decide kind of which direction we want to go in, and there are almost equal forces pushing us in different directions. And so it's a really interesting time in the UK. I am terrified. But I'm one of the fortunate ones who can just leave if it gets too difficult. But most people can't just leave. And unfortunately, they are governed by people who don't even understand basic economics. And I'm not saying I'm an expert, but even today, our Prime Minister got community noted by saying that inflation has dropped and alluded to prices dropping. He actually got corrected that a drop in inflation numbers still means prices are going up. And so that's the kind of shit show we're dealing with here. Now, you ask about the Fabians. I don't know too much about them. But I do know there is a Fabian Society. I do know that a number of politicians, especially Labour politicians, have been members of it, and they're essentially communists.
Beautiful. Dr. Kruse, could I get your response?
Somebody might, Jack might know better.
I was going to say, could you outline a little bit more about your view of the Fabians in the UK and maybe trying to penetrate into the US as well?
Well, I think most people that have listened to the podcast that I've done, especially on this topic, where they were 4 and 5 hours at a time, probably the The best one was with Breedlove when it comes to Bitcoin. Um, they're a group that started off when Queen Victoria first came to power in 1837. And most of them came from a place called Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which used to be where the royal family was based. Most people know that Queen Victoria died in 1901. She tried to unify the royal family throughout all of Europe through marriage, and that led to a shit show with hemophilia, especially in in Russia. But what was the real problem with the Fabians? Their goal was to slowly change things like 1% a year in order to get back to what they had in medieval times, which was, total absolute control. And their timeline is based on, hundreds of years. Um, where the power base goes, what was going on with Queen Victoria at the time is they had just lost the loyal title of the United States. And this was a real big sticking point for the people in England at that time. So the Fabians actually assisted the crown initially to try to help. Many of the most prominent Saxe Coburn Gotha, how shall we say, accountants and financial people wound up coming to the United States. And some of those people became, um, how shall we say, the precursor, the farm team, as we'd like to say, for what would become the Zionist movement in the United States. Many of these people were members of the Zionist Party in in Britain at the time, but these people basically in the States at that time tried to start and foment the Civil War. They were also tied to Lincoln's assassination, with the goal, obviously, to get a loyal title back, because in the beginning part of the century, when Jefferson was in power and Adams and Madison, the Brits were not very successful in trying to get back the United States what they lost. So this goes all the way through to about the 1900s. And once she dies, the shit show begins kind of with the royal family in World War One. And where we're left in World War One with the Treaty of Versailles, the key, um, what I would call Fabians that link the United States and Britain, which is probably the reason all three of us are Bitcoiners, is actually John Foster Dulles and his brother Alan Dulles, who become much more famous later in the decade, were part of the team that was working with the Keynesian folks to come up with the Treaty of Versailles. And if you understand what the Fabian modicum is, that we have to do something to get it back, I think Peter knows his history better than I do, that during World War One, a loyal title to Russia was also lost at that time. So now they've lost two big things. So what would the terms basically set by the Fabians in Britain and the Fabians in the United States? That we have to do something to create a treaty that was unsettling for everybody and would lead to another engagement, which would come down the road. What that engagement was, I think most of you know, is World War II. And the mechanics of World War II, in my view, are not well known by the Bitcoin community. Why? Because you guys have recency bias. When I say you guys, now I'm separating us as Bitcoiners. You're the young guys, I'm the old guys. I have a mastery of the history. You guys really kind of start at 1971. And what you need to know is at that time, in 1917, specifically on November 2nd, the Balfour Declaration is given to the king. The king signs off on it because as part of the Ottoman Empire, Britain gets Palestine. The goal of the Zionist Federation that was first started by Herzl, who Herzl was also a Fabian, he was an atheist. They came up with the brilliant plan to use Judaism as a shield for the Fabian action. So if you look For example, in I believe it's the London School of Economics, even to this very day, on the wall in stained glass is a picture of the Fabian, um, how shall we say, facade, which is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And nothing could be better analogized by this, by what they did in World War II. So the Zionist Federation, controlled by the Rothschilds and Balfour, then set up a plan with the Catholic Church and also the bankers with Adolf Hitler. Now, the Fabians in the United States, who were they? These were the leaders of industry. The big one that most Americans would know would be probably the leader of the Ford family and also um, the people that were running GM, JP Morgan, Westinghouse, the real capital intensive people in the United States. What was the Fabian plan in Britain? They came up with something called the transfer agreement. The transfer agreement was designed to take all the European Jews and move them to Palestine. Why? Because the Nathan Rothschild specifically wanted to fulfill the prophecy that was written in the papers to get things over there. And a lot of people don't know this, but the British Fabians actually tried to talk to the leaders of the Ottoman Empire before the war to buy Palestine from them, and they refused to do that because they were planning on doing this plan anyway. So what happens with the Fabians then? This transfer agreement is made with Hitler. What was the basis of this? Is financial benefit to power the war machine of Germany. Well, they had control of this, and this is where the system kind of goes awry. The story Peter was told in his school books was the same one I was told, was that Turing broke the Enigma code and helped everybody out. Well, it was actually the other way around. Turing was keeping everybody tied up to make sure that the transfer agreement was going. And then there was also a physical liaison, which was a cousin of the King of Spain who would run back and forth to keep each side appraised of what was going on. Because as most people know, at least in England, the Rothschilds had a 500-year history in England of basically selling bullets to both sides of the war. The same thing was true with the Fabians that were in the United States. They were doing the same thing. Who was the family that facilitated that act in the United States? That's the beginning of the Bush family cartel. That was Prescott Bush, who is the father of George H., who was the guy who was a president during the Gulf War, who died, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years ago. What did he do? He basically hid money, a la Jeffrey Epstein, for the captains of industry in both Britain and in the United States. It was much more easy to do in Britain because you didn't have too many layers to go through, but it was very difficult to get through in the United States. And they used a lot of the Wall Street banks to do that. The specific one was Brown Brothers Harriman. That's where Prescott Bush worked. So you know the rest of the history. And then we come to, 1971, where I think the Bitcoin story for most of the people listening to this, they'll know. The part that I sat down with Breedlove and got into was probably more, I think, American history than it was British Fabian history, because the American Fabians got in a big tussle with Meyer Lansky and General Groves. And Meyer Lansky and General Groves formed the industrial military complex, first in the United States. Then it was thrown out of the government by Eisenhower. Then the Russians brought it back in through the Sputnik issue. And when it comes back in, Lansky was the accountant for Murder Inc. and also for General Groves when he was on the outside. The key metric there was the company that he formed outside, which was technically an American Fabian company. It's called Sperry Rand, that eventually becomes Unisys. Those Unisys machines were used for, probably in terms of Bitcoin, one key thing. This was how Lansky had planned to make a parallel system to the CBDC that you heard about later. But the real big issue was Lansky came upon some information during World War II where he realized that the people who were Zionists that he supported, because he was a Ukrainian Russian Jew, uh, he found out that these guys were really dastardly and pretty bad. So what did he do? They became the mortal enemy of the Zionists that controlled Israel. So how did that all turn out in America? It turns out Lansky had control of the Blacksburg, Virginia computer. So what did that allow him to do? He was one step ahead of the Rothschilds and Rockefellers, who were the Fabians technically in the US. And the craziest thing in his whole story that he did that I laid out to Breedlove was that when Nixon got in power after LBJ left after Vietnam, they had killed JFK. He actually fled on his attorney's advice to Israel because, as you know, Israel has this rule that if you're a Jew, you can get, safe harbor and get a passport. And what was he fleeing from? He was fleeing from a subpoena that Nixon's cabinet wanted to go after this $3 million payment for money that was taken out of the Cuban casinos, and they wanted him to pay taxes. They really wanted to put him in jail because they knew he was a bad dude, and they couldn't get him on anything else because this guy was the best accountant in the world, better than even those that were employed by the Rothschilds and Rockefellers or the Federal Reserve. And the plan by Nixon was to put him in jail the same way they put Capone in jail, through tax evasion. So what does Lansky do? He dodges the subpoena, goes to Israel at 69, tells the Zionists that he's going to go back and tell the United States government the truth. And this is what I frame as the Top Gun idea. Believe it or not, this idea was where the Top Gun thing showed up in the movie. Lansky goes back in, tells the United States government that he has corrupted their money. The Rockefellers are stunned. All the families in the Federal Reserve are stunned. What immediately happens in 1970? The single most illegal Fabian act ever. It's called the Bank Secrecy Act. Basically, where banks are allowed to spy on Americans with impunity, breaks every rule that we have in the Constitution. And then what happens? This is where I think we all come back on board with history we know. They closed the gold window at the Nixon shock in August of 71. And what is the two parallel systems then? The Rothschilds and Rockefellers now know money is corrupted. Lansky tells them, if you want to make your money great, you got to computerize and digitize it. He tells them that it's going to be difficult. He tells them how he came up with this plan. I told you guys that's why this random walk through history is important, is if you look at the Munitions Act from World War II, you'll find something very interesting in it that shouldn't really be there. It's cryptography. And that was the key to understanding truly why Turing played a role here. Peter knows better than I do. In 1951-52, Turing was loaded into a Mossad honeypot. They caught him getting his dick sucked. They brought him up on charges of homosexuality. What was the punishment?
Chemical castration.
Right, female chemical castration. And this caused him to kill himself. How did he kill himself? He ate a cyanide-laced apple. That's how Apple Computer got its name. Lansky knew about all of this stuff, obviously, and he decides to use cryptography against his new enemy, which became the banking elite. So he told them, you got to go back to BIS and set up the CBDC system, but he warned them it was going to be difficult to do. Why? Because he had tried to do things like that himself for Murder Inc. for a long period of time, and he had a big jump start on the banking cartel. Why? Because he had General Groves Unisys computers that they had from Sperry. Long story short, Lansky, remarkably, this is a part of history that I don't think Peter would probably know. Lansky gets a complete pardon from the Nixon administration in 73, but this was the best part. The best part of the story is they let him go because they say he's going to die soon. Just so you know, he didn't die until 1983. Um, Lansky goes out and immediately talks to his lawyer in Miami, which is a guy named Ira Malnick. Ira Malnick, if you know anything about Lansky's history, his goal was never to own assets, it was to own people. So, in that sense, you could see the early Bitcoin ethos right there that you need to kind of like dial your shit down. And the part of the story that began to make no sense when I was a younger man looking into Bitcoin was how David Sham got picked. He's a Jewish guy from Cal Berkeley who graduates in debt. If you go and do a deep dive on the financials of his family, which I paid investigators to do, they had nothing, not a pot to piss in. So what was happening? And this probably will stimulate some conversation for Peter since he's in the UK. Peter, I'll ask you a question. If you were
Mm.
to open 7 companies in the UK right now, would it cost you any money to do so?
I mean, yes,
Okay.
just to
Well,
open them, but very small amounts.
right. Well, Sean does this, and these companies were up and running, making money right off the bat. The interesting thing about these 7 companies, they all had tiebacks to Lansky's pardon when he walked out. They all had tiebacks related to the Bank Secrecy Act. What was the number one thing that he did? He started to use cryptography to try to make money. He also came up with cryptography uses for voting machines, which eventually morphs into the latest story that's happening in my country right now, which is the Dominion voting machine nightmare to stack elections. And this is a Fabian thing that continues to go on even to this very day. But the interesting part of the story is Sham is quite successful for Lansky. He comes up with DigiCash. I think every Bitcoiner knows that story and what happens. It goes bankrupt. But before it goes bankrupt, what did it have as a customer? 2 big key things. First key thing is Deutsche Bank was one of its customers, which is the central bank of Germany. That should kind of fit in with the whole story. But here's the part that Americans don't really know, and I don't think a lot of Bitcoiners know. The other bank that was a customer is called the Mark Twain Bank in the United States.
CoinKite has been in the game for years, creating hands down the best and most secure hardware when it comes to securing your Bitcoin. The Cold Card Q is an absolute powerhouse and my daily driver, and it's ideal for newcomers and advanced users alike. The Tap Signer gives you a low-cost, user-friendly option for those just getting started or for convenience when traveling. You can head to coinkite.com and use code BTC Sessions for discounts, or simply scan the QR code on the screen to get started right away. One company I like pointing people to when they ask about Bitcoin mining is Abundant Mines. They were founded by Bo and Christine Turner after losing over $500,000 to broken promises in the mining industry. And they built their hosting model to remove the usual headaches. With Abundant Mines, you own your machines and keep 100% of the Bitcoin you mine. There's no revenue share, no hidden skims. Pricing is simple. One flat monthly fee covers power, parts, labor, and repairs. They also guarantee uptime. If a machine goes down, their hash rate redirect system routes hash power from their fleet, so earnings don't just stop. And every machine is insured at full replacement value. Everything is hosted in the US, powered by Hydro, and mining equipment may qualify for 100% year one bonus depreciation. Learn more at abundantmines.com/sessions.
So here's the part that Americans don't really know, and I don't think a lot of Bitcoiners know. The other bank that was a customer is called the Mark Twain Bank in the United States. And why was the Mark Twain Bank important in this story? This was a bank that was not tied to the Federal Reserve System. This was, how shall we say, Meyer Lansky's backdoor for his customers. And eventually, that link goes all the way back to Swiss bank accounts that were controlled by, let's say, after Lansky dies, people like Ira Malnick and other people that you probably would know today. So, Nathan, to put a bow on this long story, I would like you to know something I haven't told too many people. I haven't told this to Breedlove. I haven't told it to anybody. I did talk about it on my blog today. So I think it's fair game for you guys. I want you to know in 1993, when Lansky dies, do you know who the Trilateral Commission, which is controlled by the Rockefellers, hired to be their personal banker? Jeffrey Epstein, at the age of 30 years old. Okay? So you can fact check all this. You'll find out that at that time, he had no financial history. In fact, he looks a lot like David Shawn did when he came out of Cal Berkeley. And what magically starts to happen? The Zionists that are in the United States now begin using him as their accountant. And what are the things that they task him to do? The ones that you guys know are being laid out in the wash now. I've known about these things for a really long time, but the ones that I cared about, that I talked to my tribe about, the ones that you wouldn't know, which is probably tied to why I have a problem with Peter, is actually the Rockefeller medicine side. And what they did there is they were very interested in the Human Genome Project. That was one of the big things that Epstein was tasked with, besides trying to corrupt Bitcoin after it was made. This one predates the corruption of Bitcoin by almost 10 or 15 years. Why? Because you guys remember, the Human Genome Project is in the middle of the Clinton administration. Okay? What is the key thing that we find that is a death bell to the Rockefeller empire of centralized medicine, which I think all of you know is generalized and globalized everywhere in every country? They find out, they have this belief that the difference between primates and humans should be 100,000 genes. Why? Because we think we're more complex. One of the dastardly things that the Human Genome Project tells us, that we basically have the same number of genes. There's only about between 300 and 700 if you look at a gorilla versus a chimpanzee and us. But basically, we're the same as a fruit fly. And this stuns the people in Rockefeller medicine, because remember, the perception there that you guys have been told your whole life is that it has to be all about biochemistry, meaning the inside world and the genome, not the outside. And Peter should know this because one of his country mates is actually tied to this shit show story, why he's just come out in the papers in the UK, James Watson, who's now dead, who found DNA. Why was Epstein so interested in this? Well, it turns out the Rockefeller crew did the same thing that Lansky did with Shawn. They went and hired cryptographers from the NSA to hack the human genome. And guess what they found? Who was their middleman that was paying all these people off? Epstein. So if you look at the 5 key scientists that were involved in the Human Genome Project, the one guy I'm going to mention here publicly is a guy named Eric Lander. What do you need to know about Eric Lander? He did all the key work and found out the most interesting part of the story was tied to chromosome number 2. Turns out the person who spent 20% of the money to get this information, genetic information about chromosome, do you know who that was, my friends? Bill Gates, when he was still running Microsoft. So now we have 5, 6 scientists all focusing on this area. And the goal is to try to find out what it is special about chromosome number 2. How do you need to know how this story came together? Nathan, you probably know this better than Peter because you probably listened to the Breedlove podcast. I don't think Peter did. But the MK Ultra story that I put in Danny Jones' podcast and Breedlove's podcast was all about Meyer Lansky finding that SS surgeon on the Brooklyn docks. That program morphs from drugs, Mexican peyote, all the way up to polarized light. Polarized light is then used to do one thing: destroy melanin. Where's the gene that melanin comes from? Chromosome number 2. It's called POMC. Okay? What's the second thing that happens in the Rockefeller world that neither one of you know? In the 1950s, they fund the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution, basically leads to Monsanto, leads to glyphosate. You know what glyphosate fundamentally does? It's a competitive inhibitor of melanin, chromosome number 2. Okay? What's the next thing that happens? The United States Fabians moved the MK Ultra program to Stanford Research, then move it to the Brain Health Initiative. Why? The Brain Health Initiative is in Central and South America. This is where the Bush family cartel meets. Why? Because the UK banking system offshore is in the Caribbean, and Venezuela is the hub for the Bush family cartel. Okay? The goal is to take people in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s who are brown in the United States, deport them. So when you go back and look at the history of Clinton, Bush, and Obama, you'll notice that they deported more people than Trump did in his first term. The reason why is these people were going down to be programmed through this Rockefeller medicine program. Then they were sent back. Those are the people that are now invading Peter's world. They're invading our world. They're invading Nathan's world as well. Why? Because these people are set up perfectly. What happens in this whole time frame? All the research that Jeffrey Epstein does on chromosome number 2 finds this very interesting thing. In 1994, Jeffrey Friedman discovers this hormone called leptin. Leptin is tied to melanin. Why? A pathway in the brain, in the eye, specifically called the leptin-melanocortin pathway, actually turns out to be the key. Do you know where Jeffrey Friedman discovers this? 1994 in Rockefeller University in New York City. Surprise, huh? What happens next? The Rockefeller Foundation spends more money than any big pharma company ever did, hires Amgen to do a synthetic leptin trial. Guess what happens? They shelve it. Because you know what they find? If you use light, water, and magnetism, you don't need drugs. So magically, Uncle Jack, as a young man, gets asked to do a TED Talk. And guess what the name of the talk was? The leptin-melanocortin pathway. Turns out, when I was a resident, I found a whole bunch of boxes from MK Ultra that weren't destroyed from Richard Helms. Richard Helms was the CIA director who was told to destroy all MK Ultra files. The only reason that you guys know about this program today is because 20,000 documents weren't destroyed because they were misfiled in the United States government as financials. That's the only way you even found out about this. But Uncle Jack hit the mother lode when he was a resident who was told to go study this orthopedic surgeon named Robert O. Becker's work on bone by my boss. And in there, I found out this story of MK Ultra, JFK's assassination, and this story of Monsanto and melanin and chromosome 2 were all in these boxes. This occurred in 1989 to 1991. So what did I realize was going to happen when I got on the stage in Nashville? I knew that they wouldn't be happy if I told the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So what did I do? I spoke specifically about leptin and didn't talk about melanin. So what do you two need to know? The next week, I had 7 3-letter agencies after me, State Medical Board, NASA scientists, and also DARPA scientists in my office in Nashville, Tennessee. In fact, it led to the point where I was even harassed when I was given a talk to 3,700 people on a cruise ship where they put a fake tweet out to get me pulled off the boat. Okay? And this was done by people tied because they were worried that I was going to release some of the information that I'm telling you right now. So what was the goal of Rockefeller Medicine, the current Fabians? They looked at the leptin data from Amgen, and they realized that if we can get the target of the distal part, what's the other gene that's on chromosome 2 that I haven't told you about? It's called the glucagon gene. I don't expect you to know this, but you'll know this part. Do you guys know what the glucagon gene controls? GLP-1 and GLP-2. You know what those drugs are? Ozempic.
Yep.
Got it? So I think both of you know the impact of that. So what was at risk when I got on the stage? Trillions of dollars of GLP-1 drugs. Got it? Because I knew the connection to chromosome number 2. And it turns out there's a third, or I should say a fourth issue that's located on chromosome 2 that Jeffrey Epstein found that goes to the story that you guys have been hearing about called adrenochrome, okay? And blood. This is a regulatory piece that tells us how to control fetal hemoglobin versus adult hemoglobin. Why is that important? Because this ties into Becker's research. Becker found when bone was broken that how it worked. Melanin and water in a cell made a current that was 1 trillionth of 1 ampere, and that type of electricity, which is almost unfathomable, takes a red blood cell, adult, and makes it de-differentiate. Go back in time, and you guys may not know this, but a red blood cell in us has no nucleus. But when it goes back in time, it gets a nucleus, and fetal hemoglobin has a nucleus. And what do you need to know about fetal hemoglobin? That it absorbs oxygen much better than adult hemoglobin. And it turns out this is the reason why Jeffrey Epstein started to collect children. Everybody thinks it was about pedophilia, but I have news for you. That's not the whole part of the story. They found out that you could actually make melanin very easily from adrenochrome. And what was happening before the shit hit the fan? The reason why Epstein started to talk to some of the people in New Mexico was that's what the Zorro Ranch was about the genetic engineering of chromosome 2 to figure out how to optimize melanin biology for himself and for the Rockefeller clan. What did the Rockefeller people do? They weaponized the GLP-1 gene into Ozempic. So what does that do effectively? It ruins the signal in your eye that sends a 220 nanometer light to the leptin receptor, so that effectively, like Sharon Osbourne and her daughter are kind of like a blue straggler star that are getting ready to explode. And when you understand that this fits the modus operandi of blue light, which was the original MK Ultra story, then it also fits the glyphosate story, which is the competitor inhibitor of melanin. Now you have the glucagon gene. They've hit all three. The adrenochrome is the other part of this. So that's where the story is. So, sorry this was a long discussion, but why do I have a problem with Peter? Peter's a Bitcoiner. He had a big fucking podcast. He went out and told everybody he took a fucking jab, okay, to travel, which is about the stupidest fucking thing anybody could do, okay? But here's the problem. This facilitates the program that Epstein and Rockefeller want to do. Why? Because this is the key. What does melanin do? Here's the real punch in the mouth. Melanin not only absorbs all frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, but here's the key for evolution. It absorbs metals. It's a metal chelator. And it turns out to control specific metals on the mitochondrial matrix. I'll tell you what those are. Iron, copper, molybdenum, manganese, deuterium, zinc, and calcium. Those are the big ones. That's what the Human Genome Project was teaching Rockefeller and Epstein. So where did Gates, Epstein, and them fit in? What's the best way to give a kid who doesn't have a lot of melanin extra atoms that to overwhelm the melanin system? Vaccines. What's another way? Fake food. Supplements. Drugs. So what did they do over this period of 50 years? They overloaded the system with those things. What are you designing to? What is the other thing the glucagon gene does? It controls eccrine and exocrine glands in your body. Just so you guys know, this is where the monkey hair went away. We have sweat glands fucking everywhere. Monkeys don't have it. That is also on chromosome 2. What's the second big thing? What's an exocrine gland? Most of you know you have bile. You have, snot that comes out of goblet cells in your gut. What are they all designed to do? To get rid of these metals. Okay? What happens when you take a GLP-1 drug? Let me explain it to you. When Peter went out and bought that really nice car he talked about on Bitcoin Twitter a long time ago, and he bought one for his dad, this would be like Peter going to the guy in London and say, cut my dad's tailpipe off and solder it closed. How fucking long is that engine in that car going to last? That's Sharon Osbourne. That's her daughter. That's what the GLP-1 drugs do. So when I tell you these motherfuckers don't give two fucks about any of us, trust me when I tell you, I know their DNA. I know their story. I know how they roll. So Nathan, maybe now you can understand when Peter goes out and tells our tribe, hey, I did this. I don't want that as the broadcast that Bitcoiners know. Why? Because we all made the smart decision to buy money you can't fuck with. And that is the true outcard to the banking empire, and probably even going to be the outcard for the Palantir system that's being fought over. But what the thing that we can't do, the reason I went to Prague stage for 2 years in a row and specifically called McCormack out, it's very simply. I didn't use Peter as the analogy because he's not dead yet, okay? But I used Hal Finney, I used Steve Jobs, and I used Paul Allen. 3 guys who are billionaires that all died. What good is your fucking money if you're dead? So why is this a story that I think will resonate with Bitcoiners? Why I think it may have resonated with Nathan? Bitcoin and nature are both decentralized networks. Let me tell you exactly what that means. It means they're costly in time and not in energy. And nobody in fucking Bitcoin seems to understand that. My tribe understands it on the biology side. Why? Because if you don't have time, what good's your money? But that's the reason why, if you look at the Satoshi white paper, what did Len Sassaman really do? He took Adam Back's idea of proof of work, which is great, but it's no fucking big deal. Everybody wants to jerk him off, and now we know he's a real jerk off. Well, here's the key. Sassaman puts 3 bibliographies on there for timestamping. That is actually what makes Bitcoin special, because it's costly in time. And it turns out when you have 10-minute blocks, that gives you an immutable ledger. That's exactly what we want. So when Peter takes a jab, what does it say to Uncle Jack as the decentralized neurosurgeon? He just fucking put a shit block into his human blockchain. And I don't want that idea going out to anybody in his audience and anybody in our tribe. Why? Because we're some of the smartest people on the planet, because we fucking bought Bitcoin early. And the thing is, as I told Marty Bent 6 months ago, we all are going to have to fight these fuckers in Palantir once we get rid of the bankers. So guess what? It's important that we keep people who own Bitcoin understanding that time is the most valuable asset, not fucking Bitcoin.
Well, that we agree on.
When I first got into Bitcoin, I was overwhelmed. The jargon, the security risks, the fear that one mistake could cost everything. I remember staring at my screen and wondering, are my keys safe? Did I do this right? That experience is why I started BTC Sessions. For over a decade, this channel has helped millions of people like you learn how to use and secure Bitcoin. But I realized something. For many people, videos aren't enough. Everyone learns differently. Some need to ask questions in real time as an expert walks through their setup, their goals, and their threat model. And certain things like advanced cold storage, inheritance planning, privacy, and node or mining setups often can't be fully solved by watching another tutorial. So I built BTC Mentor. I recruited the best Bitcoin educators on the planet to work with you one-on-one. Real experts, real answers, personalized hands-on guidance tailored to your exact situation. Whether you're brand new or building a complex setup, we meet you where you're at and walk with you step by step. By the end, you don't just hope your Bitcoin is safe, you know it is. If you're ready for that level of confidence, then head to btcmentor.io and book a call with us today.
That we agree. That bit we agree on. I talk about that with my son quite a bit. In that, there's 2 really important scarce items in the world. One is Bitcoin, and one is time. But the interesting thing about time is, as you get older and it becomes scarcer, it becomes more important to you. But you don't actually know how much of it you have. You may have 24 hours, or you may have 24 years, and then that becomes once you start to understand that. I think I've started to understand that recently. I've been quite philosophical about my own life and decisions over the last year or so because um, uh, if you chase career and money and success, you kind of realize it's a dead end. It doesn't. You never actually reach a goal. The goal just extends out further. But time moves pretty quickly when you're chasing something. When you stop chasing, time moves pretty slowly. It becomes a little bit more enjoyable. Like now, I play tennis and read books and I've chilled out a bit more. But just for some context for you, Jack, I didn't know you, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just didn't know you, but I did keep hearing you had called me out, and you may not have seen that I've like quite publicly said I got the entire COVID thing wrong. And just for some context, is that when I got into this Bitcoin thing, I was a proper little statist, believed in the government, thought they cared about us and they were the truth, and I would go to work and earn my money and come home and have a holiday and look after my kids and follow that little path. And I guess what I've done is I've spent the last 8-9 years like learning about how the world really works and doing it publicly. So every one of those mistakes, I've done it to an audience of, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. And then I've had to acknowledge those mistakes in public. But a lot of people have made the similar mistakes. They just haven't done it in public. But at no point do I ever make a decision and think, I'm making a terrible decision. I'm going to do this in public. It's just, that's the way I've had to do it. So yeah, I mean, I fucking regret the whole COVID. I think the COVID thing was like the final straw where I was like, yeah, fuck them. I hate them all. I hate the government. I hate everyone who works in the government. And shit, I wish I'd never taken that jab and said such stupid shit.
Well, the big thing that you need to know, because you don't have this context, you may not remember, but used to visit clubhouse rooms with Hoddle and British.
Oh, a long time ago, yeah.
I was in those, and we had a pretty good fight about this COVID thing, you and I.
Yeah, probably did.
That's where it starts.
I don't remember that, but you might be right.
Right. Well, I know I'm right, and so do they, because they remember it. And I'm going to tell you that there's one thing you're going to learn about me. When you have a bully pulpit, which you and Nathan and BT Sessions does, I didn't in Bitcoin. My bully pulpit is in science. When I saw that, I said, I need to remedy that. Why? Because when people have the bully pulpit, it's not you, Peter. I may come off sounding like a total jackass here, but it's not
you're fine.
That I really care about. It's actually your fucking audience. Why?
Oh no, but I'm the same.
Not be smart enough to fucking figure out really what the game is, and if they think, hey, well, Peter did it, why the fuck can't I? I want to go travel too. I want to go to Lugano. I want to go to the beach. I want to go to El Salvador and talk to Bukele. But the ultimate thing is, and I think this is all the platforms. I'm talking about. Nathan will tell you the last time I was on with him, I fucking went nuclear with David Bailey. And now that turns out it looks like it was pretty smart too. But this is what I'm saying. We have to get back to the ethos of Bitcoin. The ethos of Bitcoin is what it is. We all know what it is, and we don't need to question it. The key is all the noise out there. We need to keep the people on it smart, healthy, and wealthy. They're linked. People don't realize they're linked because of this, what I told you before. It's costly in time. And Peter, just so you understand this, because I do want you to hear it, the reason why you have a different experience with time when you're older and younger, you're going to be shocked when you hear this. Your mitochondria make water. When your baby was born and came out of your wife's vagina, that baby was 90% water. Right now, here I am in my technically 7th decade, but in my 60s, I'm only about 55% water. How we experience time is actually a combination of how water and melanin work together. Why? Because what I told you earlier in my rant, that Becker's work found out that 1 trillion to 1 ampere, if water or melanin are fucked, That's what determines how we experience time. So you remember when you were a kid, it seemed like Christmas took 10 years to come. Now, when you're an adult and you got to pay the bills, it seems like it comes every 2 or 3 months. But that's the reason why it happens. It's actually a physical reason why this occurs because we become less efficient both in creating melanin and making water through our mitochondria to do this. And the reason why I guess your jab infuriated me is because this played right into the Rockefellers' plans. Because what have they done? For 75 years, they've done everything they possibly could to destroy water and melanin biology through their policies and the use of their fiat money. I mean, I know most Bitcoiners hate the Rothschilds and Rockefellers because of the fiat side, but if you really knew the depravity of these people, just in COVID alone, I got on Danny Jones' podcast with Mary Talley Bowden. I estimated that the minimum death rate in the United States is about 600,000 people. Now, because that was 2 years ago, now I know it's over 3 million. But worldwide, we're over 20 million people dead from this policy. And when I said this to Breedlove, he did something pretty remarkable after he left me. He said the United States spent $6 trillion on COVID. And at the time he did the podcast, he said, that's about 2 million people. We spent $6 trillion to kill 2 million people. Think about the money, the mechanics there. And then when you think about why you got me so angry, because I know in Bitcoin, we may have 2, 3 million people. That makes up the bulk of Nathan's audience, your audience, Danny's audience, Breedlove's audience. Those people, we need to fucking take care of them, dude. Like you can't imagine. And
I
even
agree.
when they're a fucking idiot, if
Yeah.
they're a fucking idiot, you still have a duty. Why? Because as I said to Nathan last time, you don't like everybody that you sit down at the Thanksgiving Day table with. That's fine. You still have to put up with your uncle that's a pain in the ass. But it's much easier to put up with somebody if you know that they're looking out for your back and they don't want you to get taken out. Because we're going to need, you may not be the person, Peter, that picks up the pitchfork and fucking shoots the gun at the Labor Party. But I got news for you. It may be your kids. It may be their friends. It may be those two little boys that I just did the podcast with in the UK. We don't know who it's going to be, but we need to be around so that when the shit hits the fan, and that shit hitting the fan is coming soon, we need people to be healthy enough to think, forget about the fight, to think, how do we take Palantir apart? How do we take CARP apart? How do we take the Zionists in the United States and Britain and Israel apart so that we can get our freedom back?
Peter, if you can, I'd actually love to go into any updates you have on the I No Longer Consent project and what you're trying to achieve there, and then maybe get Dr. Jack's response if that's in terms of a solution for the UK.
Well, so I've grown to really hate state because it seems like everything they do is terrible, evil, and ruins everything for everyone everywhere. I've just become really fucking hateful of the state, and it's very, once you really see it, it's a bit like with Bitcoin. Once you have Bitcoin, you understand price signals a lot better. You see the world differently. You see the world things are price. Once you start to really understand government, you just see their behavior. You see the things they're saying and why they're saying it. Whatever politician it is, whatever narrative they're selling for, whatever special interest, but they are really just rival gangs fighting for control of territory. And so I've just come to really hate it. I've come to hate every politician. I've come to hate the mechanics of the state. And I think it's very difficult to get rid of government, but I do think it's possible to make it small and as ineffective as possible if you have the right person who comes into power who themselves hate the state or love people enough to be able to make the kind of the right policy decisions, like ones which aren't based on their own power and objectives and career goals, which is based on just protecting the people. So I've come to really hate it, and I no longer consent was like, I just personally no longer consent to this. And as a lone person, it means nothing. You need millions of people across the country to say, I've fucking had enough of this shit. To say I no longer can consent. And just refuse to comply with a system that only they get you get consent at the point of an election, but really consent comes every day from millions of people going about their daily business, contributing to the system, going to work, paying their mortgages, paying their credit cards. Like, if you want to bring it down, just everyone stop. Like, everyone just stop paying their mortgages, stop going to work, stop using their credit cards, stop buying Starbucks coffee. You could stop it for a day and see the impact. Just stop it for a week. But you need enough people pissed off that and of the belief that it cannot be fixed from inside the system. That has to be an outsider that comes in. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make people realize you do not have to consent to this bullshit. If you're pissed off, I guarantee you voting for a different color team is not going to change fucking anything. Like, Jeff Booth has told us all, this system relies on continual theft. There's a continual transfer of wealth upwards to the asset holders, of which I'm one of them, and I think it's vile. But the vast majority of people, the people who allow the system to operate, are all the ones being robbed. It's a very small minority who benefit from the system. Everyone else is being stolen from continually, and it's like, at what point do you get sick of being stolen from? Like, what point do you stop consenting to being stolen from? So, yeah, that's really what the project is to inspire people to go, I don't consent to this anymore. We really are in charge if we want to be in charge. We are the vast majority of the population. But you have to get enough people to stop believing in it, and that is a challenge.
No, fair enough. Dr. Kruse, before I come to you, I just want to point out, Peter, I feel like you're one whiskey away from actually running yourself.
Do you know what? Interestingly, at the moment, I've always looked for an anti-establishment option. It was Millet who said the only person who should become a politician is somebody who, like, absolutely hates the state, who wants to shrink it as much as possible. And we have one person at the moment in the UK, a guy called Rupert Lowe, who's a single MP, who was kicked out of Reform, who recently launched his party Restore, and he appears to be an anti-establishment option. And I've spoken to him, I've spoken to people who work for him. Like, if they can answer the Jeff Booth question, which is technology deflationary? Should everything get cheaper, better, faster? Yes. If they can answer that question with a yes, and then say, well, is there a conflict here with the debt-based economy? If they agree, yes, and the only solution is a hard money standard, of which Bitcoin is the answer to me, but I don't mind if it's gold. It's a good starting point. If they would come out with an agenda which repairs that, of which one country's done it, where Jack is right now, which is that public? You're in El Salvador?
Yeah.
You don't need to edit that. Like, it's the only country that's done it. Look what's happened to El Salvador. The first time I went there were still red zones and gangs, and now there isn't. Like, they have adopted the right monetary standard. Yeah, if they would come out and say they were going to do that, they were going to focus on fixing this economic problem, then they'd have my support. Would I become an MP? I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know if I'm smart enough.
Sorry. I think you put them on too high of a pedestal. No, I think you put them too high on a pedestal. I think you play yourself down and you're putting them way too high. The fact that you're holding a conversation right here with everything that we've covered, Peter, you're not average, buddy. You might think that you are, but you're definitely well above.
But my role in always this and doing interviews is trying to get very smart people to explain things somebody like me can understand, because the vast majority of the audience is more like me. They're like, what the fuck's going on in the world and how do I navigate it? The vast majority of people aren't super intellectual. And I would rather a government of very boring intellectual people than mouthpieces who can win a personality contest. And so I'm happy to sit in the background. I'm happy to help write maybe a Bitcoin/crypto policy, because you can't really have a Bitcoin policy without at least talking about crypto. And I'd happily support that, but I don't know if I'd run. I don't know if it's for me. Weirdly, I'm very tired these days. You might have a good answer to this, Jack. Jack, over the last 6 months, all my ambition's gone. And I don't know why. I spent a whole life massively ambitious, and it's just all gone.
Well, I mean, I would tell you the single number one thing to get it back is actually to plug back into nature. I mean, you remember, you were ambitious with the podcast that you gave to Danny. That's when you plugged into the first network, which is manufactured, which is Bitcoin. I would tell you, now that you're older, realize what I told you, that you need your melanin and your water battery tuned up. What happens when this happens, when you lose your ambition? You ruin melatonin, dopamine, and GABA in your system. And guess what that does? your brain browns out. And
yeah, I think I've done that.
And that's kind of what happens. And what I would tell you is, remember, I'm much older than you. I'm here and I'm fucking feisty, dude. I'm more
I
feisty
can
now
tell.
than when I was, in my practice in Nashville, in Destin. And I look at it this way. I think the best way to lead is to sharpen steel with steel. And I am fucking sick and tired of the pussies in my fucking profession, keep leading sheep to their slaughter. And to be honest with you, that's kind of how I came to all this. When I came to Bitcoin, it was to save one of our Bitcoin only guys, which was Dorsey. And when you understand the things that I said to you, I mean, he came to me with the same issue. Like, dude, I'm browning out. I need to understand. Well, look where he is now. He's in Costa Rica. He's a next door neighbor to me. I would tell you, you got all this Bitcoin money, sell the fucking soccer team, get your ass down here. I mean,
I'm browning out.
I'm being honest with you. I think it's not only good for you, it's good for your family. But when you really understand that it makes a difference, and I would tell you, you don't have to do it right away, but what you would be smart to do, and this is the same advice I gave Jack Mullers almost a year ago. I said, get out of Chicago, come down here for like 3 or 4 months and see how it goes. Nathan may know this guy. There's a pretty famous developer in Bitcoin. Sam Parker is a good friend of mine. Sam had huge problems. He's 31, 32 years old. I invited him to come down and stay with me here in El Salvador. In 3 months, he walked back and forth on my front yard for 3 months with no shirt on. And he's from Canada. And guess what? No shoes. Everything that was bothering him went away. Now he's trying to find the love of his life somewhere in Europe.
Nothing's really bothering me, apart from obviously the state of our government. I mean, but like, I used to wake up every day ambitious. I want to build this. And now I don't. I want to go to the gym, play tennis, read a book, cook a good meal, and go to bed. And maybe it's a good thing, but it's like I'm so used to being full of energy, and I'm not. It's like almost like I've gone from this.
I think there's a change that you can make. I mean, I would tell you, you want to put time back in your battery. That's how you do it. Plug into that other network, which is nature. That's fully decentralized. I mean, I think you owe it to yourself and your family at least to give it a try and see if it changes things. Then if it does, that's when the tough decisions will come afterwards. So, okay, what am I going to do with this? Now that I know that this is the case, okay, what do I do with it? That's a totally different, podcast, but I would tell you what effectively are you doing? You're actually making the statement, yeah, my time is valuable and I need to do something to improve it.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. Okay. Nature.
Peter, I would also chime in that maybe, just maybe, another contributing factor might be the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, the kids are either at the point of getting out of the house or near to getting out of the house, which was, at least for me personally, one of the most motivating things that ever happened to me. So I suspect that might be also contributing to a decline in ambition, is that the bigger, broader mission is kind of almost coming to a close here for a time being.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I was lit on fire when my kids got up.
I think part of it is like, perhaps for me, I was thinking like when I had like ambition for success and money, I thought I was chasing something, but then I think I perhaps realized I was running away from something. Does that make sense? Like, because I thought you reach this point and like suddenly you're happy, and it's like it never, like when you're chasing.
Oh no, it's like the Anthony Bourdain thing, right? Like, how unbelievably successful was that guy, and then he goes ahead and he kills himself? It's because not realizing that like the meaning, fulfillment, and motivation comes from, one, good health, but then also comes internally. That if you externalize goals and ambitions, the problem is your brain is so, and Dr. Kruse, please correct me if I'm wrong, your brain is so goal oriented that's actually paying attention to when you're getting closer to the goals. It's less concerned when you actually get them, which is why you need that next kind of dopamine hit. You have to go to the next thing too. Like, I think about, we just had like the Winter Olympics, right? I think about people that spend their entire life for that one goal that they do achieve potentially in their youth. Like, just imagine everything about you is trying to get a gold medal at the Winter Olympics, and then you do it. Now what the fuck are you going to do? Now what? That was
Yeah.
the entire purpose of what you were doing. It could really, basically, you're left without a mission or meaning or something to pursue.
I agree with everything you just said, Nathan, except one thing. I don't think Anthony Bourdain killed himself. I think he was killed.
Okay,
Really?
you're not going to just drop that. Tell me why. Yep.
Believe it or not, it's tied to the Epstein story.
I completely believe it.
He and the lady, I'm trying to remember her name. She used to be a
The
famous,
Italian.
the bag lady. What was her name, Chantel? The one that sold the bags.
Oh,
Kate Spade. Kate Spade and
Oh.
him lived close to each other in New York, and they were both tied to this story with children abduction and this and that. Bourdain knew a lot about this because he was in the same circles as Epstein and all of his people. And I believe that Kate Spade, and you should know who Kate Spade was. Her brother is David Spade, who was clearly, in with most of the pedophiles and crazy bastards in Hollywood. She was too close to the fire, just as Anthony was. And I think they were taken out as part of, how shall we say, keep the propaganda quiet.
That's crazy. Okay. I want to pivot back for 1 second and make sure we cover this topic as well too, because we even started off asking about the UK and we're talking about Peter's situation. You're encouraging to get out, and maybe Peter, we can get you to commit to go visit Dr. Jack there for a week or two, maybe see if you feel better. I'm curious, in your opinion, Dr. Jack, with even trying, like, Peter's admirable pursuit of trying to actually exercise political power through basically, like, I would just say, non-compliance and growing the population, trying to wake people up to it. Is the UK beyond saving? Or is it possible to actually wake up the savages and make something happen?
No, and I was going to interrupt earlier, but I didn't want to, because I don't think Peter or you understand that the Fabians in the United States made it so that this is what Peter's facing. What did MK Ultra do at scale? When you put polarized light around all of us, basically what did you just do? You destroyed your ability to make dopamine. And I don't expect you guys to know this, but do you know how you make dopamine? You make it from aromatic amino acids, specifically L-tyrosine and L-phenylalanine. Guess what polarized light does? It turns it to D-tyrosine and D-alanine. You can't make melanin. And then what happens? Non-native EMF, which is what MK Ultra use, it takes melanin that's fully made and turns it back into dopamine. So guess what happens? You now have a way to drain your battery. And this MK Ultra program, that's why it was extremely important that the Rockefeller Foundation set this up. Everybody is dumbed down. Like what Peter just said about his life as a guy in the UK, high latitude podcaster, plugged in, he doesn't realize that there's a biophysical reason he feels this way. He's being drained of water and melanin. And what I'm trying to tell him, this is not trying to be hyperbolic. This is actually biologic. And it's incredible that it's coming out in this podcast, because I never thought we would ever go here. But this is happening to everybody, Peter. 8 billion people on the planet. And what happens is the people that understand how to maintain their entropy are the people that come to places like this. That's what I've been saying to Marty. It's what I said to Breedlove. I was very public with Breedlove on Twitter when he couldn't have a baby with the girl that he's with. I said, Robert, you're in fucking Miami. You think it's good, but it's not. I said, you have to realize things have to change. And people, I think, can look at it as criticism, but I actually, I can't say that I love Robert, but I care about him because he's part of the Orange family. And I want to see him do well because I know his audience needs to see this as well. I don't know who's going to be the next group of young Bitcoiners. I just told Nathan, I did a podcast with these two little 18-year-olds in the UK. They could be it. I don't know. But I have to tell you, Peter, you probably should go listen to that podcast, because you know what both of the boys said? Both of the boys said to me that they want to leave the UK and come to El Salvador because when their mom goes and visits to do all the art shows, in the places, every time she comes back from a place where there's an oasis of sun, water, and magnetism, she actually does better. Like they see it in their own mother. And you have to realize they're quantumly entangled with the mother, from a biologic perspective. So I think the problem that we have as adults, sometimes even our young kids who are, little retards, they can actually tell us, hey, there's something to this. And I would tell you, it'd probably be the greatest gift that you could give your family, for you to be fully charged and fully loaded, but also for them to be fully charged and fully loaded. And, if you want to go back to your life once you get, charged up, there's no reason you can't do that. But I think the other thing I would remind you specifically, since you're a UK guy, remember my country. We had people that didn't want to pay a 3% tax. They wanted to worship God. They moved to the United States. They actually were able to change Britain from being outside the United States. I'm going to tell you, I think that's Jack's program. That clearly isn't what Peter McCormack is at now. But do I believe that the Bitcoin country will have no borders, but it's going to have all of us in it as MPs, Peter? And we are going to legislate what our tribe should be doing from wherever we are. And I think the oases that I want you to be is places where you can harness entropy and harness time so that you can make the best decisions, not only for your Bitcoin, but also for your life. And I think if we start to resonate that out in our podcast and our meetings, I told Nathan the last time I was on with him, the most probably uncomfortable thing is I think some of the things that's going on in the Bitcoin world with meetings and David Bailey, we need to stop doing that. We're putting targets on ourselves. It makes no fucking sense to do that. What makes more sense is for us to sit here on my teak deck, open up a bottle of wine and have this kind of discussion much more frequently. And guess what? Yeah. Then we go and talk to each other. And believe it or not, Max and Stacy are my next door neighbors. They just had their big event here at the golf tournament. That's kind of what happened. And then I had my members event here in December, and Max and Stacy came over and met, the mitochondriacs. And he's beginning to see the synergy as well. He's like, I'm beginning to get it. Like I admonished both of them around Christmas time. I said, don't go home. Why are you going home? What's the point? You're busy here. Stay here. This is the best place for you to be. And I think that message resonates best when you actually try it yourself. It's great to give it lip service, but in my band TED talk that was tied to this thing, I made a comment that's still, I think, my best quote. Ideation without execution leads to deletion of every good idea. So if you have a good idea and you don't execute it, what fucking good is it?
I like it. Yeah. Stuff to ponder on here now. But I'm glad we spoke, Jack.
I think that's the perfect place to wrap it up. That maybe we'll be hanging out on that teak deck and having a bottle of wine, further discussing this a little bit later on.
Yeah, Nathan, we should head down there.
I agree. I think that'd be a wonderful trip. I think I could use it. I think my wife could really use it. I think I kind of have to at this point in time. She's been barefoot and pregnant for basically 3 in a row here, so I think she probably deserves it.
Yeah, I think so. Jack, I'm glad we got to meet.
All right, no problem.
Wonderful, gentlemen. Jack, tell everybody where they can find you. Peter, tell everybody where they can find you.
I'm Dr. Jack Kruse on all social media platforms. That's probably the easiest way. If you want me, you'll find me.
And I'm Peter McCormack everywhere, and my show is called The Peter McCormack Show.
Hey, you. Yes, you watching the Bitcoin price movements and the latest exciting news. It's awesome to stay informed, but the real power of Bitcoin comes from taking control. Don't just watch, take action. Head over to btcsessions.ca/learn for free step-by-step tutorials that guide you through every major skill you need to know, plus full video playlists for deeper dives on any topic you like. And if you're ready for the ultimate fast track, scroll to the bottom and check out bitcoinmentor.io for premium one-on-one experience with my team of Bitcoin experts to ensure you get it right the first time. Don't wait. Secure your Bitcoin future today. Hit the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen.
If you enjoyed this episode with Peter McCormack and Dr. Jack Kruse, please do like and subscribe. It really does help out. And check out the previous episode with Professor David Collum.